everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Angie and it's nice to have you guys here. Today I thought we'd do like a little coffee chat, just chat in general. I've got my cold brew iced coffee in my mug here. This mug says, I can't decide if I need a hug, a large coffee, or if I should just take a long nap. I honestly probably need all three, but I'm starting with the coffee. Anyway, I'm looking at my laptop because I do have some notes. I've been wanting to film this video for a couple months now, and it just kept getting pushed back because of the semester and wrapping that up, and then trying to just rest throughout May as much as possible, trying to kind of live what I'm about to talk about. So if you've been watching my vlogs for any length of time now, because I've been talking about this and doing some reading on it for a good few months now, you've seen me talk about starting a journey towards slow living, mindful living, intentional living, however you want to talk about it. I know that like the slow living movement has come out of like the slow food movement, and there's lots of different examples, and I'm not sure that I really am aligning myself with a particular movement or community or group of people. I don't have a whole, like, I'm not interested in following other people's rules about this. It's more like just I'm trying to make changes in my own life. And so I wanted to do a video and start a short like video diaries series on this channel about this topic, to kind of talk about it in more detail and to talk about my journey in this in more detail. So I'm going to continue like weaving this into the vlogs. I've already been talking about in the vlogs. I'm sharing a lot of the books as I'm reading them in the vlogs, although at some point I will probably film like a roundup of some of my favorite books, kind of a thing. But I wanted to have a separate series for when I have specific updates or conversations related to this topic that I want to have that maybe won't fit or would just take up too much space in one vlog. So I'm hoping to maybe do 4 or 5 of these throughout the rest of the year. So I've kind of broken down my notes into a few different categories. So motivations, misconceptions and starting points, what's been helping me so far, and moving forward. So like how I'm moving forward with this. So starting with motivations, the decision to start slowing down was definitely influenced by the pandemic. I felt like it really changed my perspective on life and how I wanted to live life. I hated how stressed and anxious I constantly was. I hated how I felt like I wasn't enjoying the present moment. I was always putting happiness out as some future thing. I'll be happy when XYZ happens, or when I check ABC things off the list, or when I accomplish 1, 2, 3 things. And I wasn't really happy with that. My depression and anxiety were at an all-time high. I was just feeling really miserable mentally. There was lots of trauma through my job and dealing with the pandemic, lots of secondary trauma that I was experiencing in that my students were going through a lot of really difficult things, and then they were emailing me or Zoom calling me with those things, talking about them, trying to get help for them. And even when I would then refer them on to the counseling services or to the student advocacy office, I still was listening to them in the first place. You know, I still had to listen to their story to help them, and I was happy to do that, but I was experiencing that on a much larger and more frequent scale than I ever have before. In the past, I would have like one of those students every semester or 2, and now I was getting several every semester. The amount of emotional labor I was doing was higher than I've ever experienced in all of my years of teaching. The amount of emotional labor that teachers do just on a regular basis without the pandemic is already higher than you might experience in other fields. So then when you add in the pandemic and teaching 100 to 125 students who are all dealing with their own trauma response to what's happening, and who are all dealing with burnout just as I am, it's a lot. I had gotten to a point where I was dealing with fairly severe burnout. I knew I couldn't keep going the way that I was. Then around the end of last year, I started realizing there were some health issues going on. I was realizing that my blood pressure was going up and staying up. That was when I made the decision that I thought I wanted to come off the hormonal contraceptive pill that I was on, but also considering other things to help with my blood pressure. So went to the doctor. In October, I was diagnosed with high blood pressure and was put on medication and came off the hormonal contraceptive pill. Both of those things seemed to help my blood pressure almost immediately. Like within a week, I was noticing my blood pressure was the most normal and consistent it had ever been as an adult. And that was helping me feel like I had just a little bit more energy, which was great, not used to that. But then I was noticing that I was still having some just irregular heart rate issues. And so when I went in for my 1-month follow-up for the blood pressure, brought up the heart rate issues and was referred to a cardiologist. So fast forward to February, after a bunch of tests, found out that structurally my heart was perfectly fine, totally normal, but electrically I was diagnosed with a condition, very common condition, called PSVT, which is paroxysmal supraventricular tachycardia. Sounds really scary. It certainly did to me at the time. It just means sometimes my heart rate jumps up and beats really, really fast for like 3 seconds, and then it chills back out. And so it feels weird when I feel it. I don't always feel it, but when I do, it feels like a muscle spasm, but deeper in my chest. And so it's a bit like, oh, okay. And so I was put on medication for that as well. And now, you know, end of May, I feel, as far as those two conditions are concerned, I feel pretty good. You know, in talking to the doctors, it was pretty clear that the cause of the high blood pressure and the PSVT is most likely age and genetics, but the stress definitely wasn't helping. And, you know, the cardiologist or the physician's assistant at the cardiology office, you know, said that stress will make it worse. The more stressed I am, the more likely I am to have these episodes. It's one of those things where stress may not have caused these problems, but it's definitely not helping these two particular problems. And so it just added to that feeling of I really do need to slow down and reduce my stress levels. And then it was also just this overwhelming feeling of unhappiness. Turning 40 during a pandemic, I feel like at some point, I think this is why people have midlife crises. Feel like 40 is now the new 30, so you know that those midlife crises are kind of coming around more. Like if they don't get you by around age 30, they'll get you by around age 40. And so I think I was having a bit of just a midlife reevaluation and just realizing, wow, like I don't want to feel as miserable at 50 as I kind of feel right now at 40. Well, I'm 41 as I'm filming this video, but like I started thinking about this around my 40th birthday. It just made me realize that I was really delaying happiness, falling into that trap of I'll be happy when I get married, I buy a house, I move to London. We all do this. We all fall into this trap. It's a very common thing. I didn't want to keep thinking of happiness as something out there in the future waiting for me someday. I wanted to be happy right now because as the pandemic was showing us, tomorrow isn't guaranteed. So happiness and kind of the lack of happiness, or using happiness as some vague, nebulous motivator for the future, just wasn't working, and I didn't want to do that. The pandemic also kind of meant that, you know, there was no traveling, there was no seeing friends except for virtually on FaceTime and Zoom and things like that. I wasn't going to the movies at the movie theater anymore. I wasn't going out to lunches and dinners. It felt like there was nothing to look forward to, and I feel like that was something else that I'd always fallen into the trap of. It wasn't just happiness in general as being something I had to achieve in the future. It was also living my life from one high moment to the next. With the pandemic, I wasn't spending money if I could help it. I was saving as much as possible. All the things that used to bring me small moments of what I thought were happiness were now out of reach. You know, living my life from one London trip to the next. It's like, I don't know when the next time I'm going to London is. The idea of having nothing to look forward to just added to the depression. And it just felt like, I want to be happy right now without needing something to look forward to. And so that made me really stop and think, okay, if happiness right now in this moment is the goal, what do I need to do to set that up, to make that a reality? And so that's when I started kind of looking into slow living. I think the book A Calm Christmas and a Happy New Year by Beth Kempton, which I read January of 2021, was probably a indirect catalyst. Like, that was kind of the first book kind of within that like slow living sphere within like books that I was like, there's a lot in here that's really resonating. And I'd already previously read The Power of Now. I also reread that throughout the early months of the pandemic. I now have a like fully page flagged and annotated copy of The Power of Now on my desk. So whenever I need just that little boost, I can read that. But that's more about mindfulness, not so much about slow living as a lifestyle. I started like looking up like YouTube videos. YouTube is a very like easy, fast, free way of doing just a quick shallow dive into all of these different like communities, philosophies, ways of thinking, ways of living. And so I started checking out just a general search of like slow living on YouTube. I was intrigued, but there were definitely some misconceptions from what that shallow dive revealed to what I started like learning about as I dove a little bit deeper. It felt like everyone I saw who lived what looked like a slow life, or who marketed themselves or branded themselves on YouTube as a slow living channel, it just kind of seemed like they were all people who had given up everything to live in a van and travel, or ditched their job to go live in a cabin in the woods or a cottage in the countryside and like forage berries for food, which sounds idyllic, you know, it sounds like a great life, but it wasn't really that practical for me. It just didn't feel attainable. It felt like that very aspirational kind of YouTube type stuff that is great to watch and makes for excellent content, but as far as like presenting something realistic that would feel actionable, it didn't. It felt like, this is too out of reach. I can't do this. It also seemed at first as if slow living was heavily connected to minimalism. If you are a minimalist, cool. I fully support you in doing that. I will never be a minimalist. It's never gonna happen. I have no interest in being a minimalist. I like my things, I like my stuff, they bring me joy. I'm definitely trying to like declutter and get rid of things that don't bring me joy and that don't like serve a purpose. That also made slow living feel like, well, if slow living is all about, if it's just an offshoot of minimalism and it's all about getting rid of everything you own to go live in a van, like, then I need something else. But I kept looking because it felt like there was something about slow living in general, without getting too specific, that felt right for me. So I kept pushing. I found a really good book called Seeking Slow. I will try to put the name of the author on the screen. Really liked her book because it did feel like, okay, these are things I can start doing right now in my current apartment with my current job, living in the city I currently live in. Like, I can't change, or at least I can't change them right away. I can't change my life circumstances. I'm still a single woman in my 40s living in a major, you know, metropolitan area, living in the Phoenix Valley, greater Phoenix Valley. I'm still heavily dependent on my car, so walking to work and taking a moment to enjoy the trees, you know, in addition to being a major urban area where I'm dependent on my car, it's also 5 million degrees Fahrenheit outside for about 6 months out of the year. Longtime viewers have heard me complain about this endlessly, so I will spare you all in this video. Walking, being out in nature, it's not a good thing in the summer. So, you know, some some of the things that you kind of see about slow living just didn't feel that practical. But in this book, in the book Seeking Slow, it felt like, okay, here are things I can do. Here are things I can add into my morning routine, my evening routine, the way I design and kind of decorate my home, the way I organize things in my home. And so it made me think that I could start carving out my own path. So kind of at this starting point, because I've been kind of in this place for a few months. It's why I've been meaning to film this video for like at least 2 months now, because I wanted to do a video at the beginning of this journey. I think like this is going to be a major focus for me throughout the summer. Really wanted to try to spend this summer really nailing down some of like what my slow living principles are, what are the things that I value, what are my non-negotiables, what are my deal breakers, what are kind of the main pillars of how I want to live my life going forward. So this summer, those are the things I really want to focus on, and I think that's what you'll be seeing in a lot of the vlogs. I kind of wanted to document this and film this because this is bringing up like a lot of questions for me of like, what does it look like? What does this journey into slow living look like for a burned out, recovering perfectionist, recovering workaholic, former-ish academic, you know, who is coming out of an environment and has come from an environment. Like, I got into this place because I spent so many years in an environment that pushed me to push myself to the max. As an academic, slow living is like the antithesis of what we are expected to do. You're always expected to do more, to do better, to work harder, work faster. The whole idea of work smarter, not harder, it's more like in academia, it's work smarter so that you can work harder. Be more efficient so you can get more done. The struggle for me was I came out of grad school, I came out of my PhD after 7 years in a row of grad school, between a master's and a PhD. And I was so burned out from that experience. But now I was working full time. I wasn't recovering from the burnout. And then we hit a pandemic. And so that just took my burnout to another level. So what does slow living and mindful living look like for someone like me? Someone who is, you know, definitely in the past would have described myself as a type A, perfectionist, workaholic, gotta do all the things, be all the things to all the people. Yeah, I don't want to do that anymore. But it's not just a switch I can flip. So what does it look like to change that? I don't know. That's what we're finding out. So that's kind of what I want to talk about in the future vlogs and in future installments of the Slow Living Diaries. Everything I'm doing now is kind of through this lens. So starting my coaching business, writing my novels, self-publishing my novels, the upcoming fall semester as a full-time instructor, all of these things I'm having to figure out what does my daily schedule look like if I'm approaching it from a slow living perspective. How many hours a day do I devote to things? How much pressure do I put on myself to accomplish certain things? Can I let go? Can I like pry my fingers off the grip of perfectionism? Can I be okay with publishing a book that isn't perfect? You know, can I just accept I'm doing the best that I can on these books, and if something has slipped by me, then it slips by me. It's hard. You know, I definitely saw with putting out Brave together that I was overanalyzing and second guessing everything, and it was like a huge reason why it got so delayed, because of the perfectionism and because of the pressure I was putting on myself, which was then causing me to like freeze and not want to do any work on it. I'm just thinking like, how do I live a life where I don't try to keep an iron grip on control over everything? Because it's a false sense of control. I'm self-aware enough to recognize that. Like, intellectually, I know I have zero control over most of the things that stress me out, and I need to learn to be okay with that. So what's helping so far? Finding resources that demonstrate a realistic view of slow living, mindfulness, and happiness. Another thing that's been helping is prioritizing time for me, basically prioritizing self-care. So making time to sleep, eat, drink water, take care of my mind and my body every day. So exercise, yoga, therapy, physical therapy, and making time each day just for me. So doing things just for me, just because I want to, like reading in bed for an afternoon on the weekend. Another thing that helps is being very clear about what is actually worth stressing about. Spoiler, nothing, or very few things are actually worth stressing about. On the one hand, I hate when people say, oh, it could be worse, because yeah, it could always be worse. Just any casual glance at the nightly news shows me that there are a million worse things happening, not even that far away from me right now. But it can also be better. And so it's not about it could be worse, so cheer up. It's more, will stressing about this particular thing make a difference to that thing? Stress and unhappiness is usually caused by being stressed or anxious about something in the future that may or may not happen, or being upset about something in the past that is already done that we can't change. And so in this moment, like I'm getting a lot better about asking myself, in this present moment, is there anything I can do to change the thing that I'm stressing about? If there isn't, I try to stop thinking about it. It's about recognizing when I have those thoughts, acknowledging the thought, acknowledging I feel really stressed right now, or I feel really anxious, or I feel really unhappy, or really sad, or really depressed about this particular thing right now. Or even acknowledging I feel really stressed and anxious and depressed, but it's just kind of a general feeling. I can't pinpoint what specifically is causing that. Acknowledging those thoughts, but then moving on from that and not living in that space. So either reframing it if it's something that I can reframe. Sometimes there are things where it is really hard to not stress because it might not be happening right now in this very moment, but it's going to happen tomorrow. And so I can get really anxious. And so sometimes it is harder to reframe or to distract myself. But the more I'm practicing it, the more I'm engaging in that habit, the easier that's getting. And then getting outside when I can. So this has been the difficulty about summer. I felt like I was doing really, really good in the early part of this year. Like through the first half of the semester, I was super stressed with work. And there was a lot of just not good stuff going on. And I was overdue with the book. And there was just a lot. But the weather was nice and I could go for walks on a pretty much daily basis. And as the weather's gotten hotter, that's been a little bit more difficult. I'm realizing how much I love living seasonally and being out in nature. I think yoga is going to be a really important part of the summer. Just feeling more connected, because what I miss about going for my walks is feeling connected to my body in that way. I think yoga is something I can do indoors that still gives me that feeling. So finally, moving forward, it's definitely a work in progress. I have good days and I have not so good days. I have days where I feel like I'm really in that like slow, mindful living groove and like, yeah, I've got this. Isn't life wonderful? Isn't life great? Like all these like special, like simple moments and moments of magic. That's another thing I'm really trying to like cultivate this year, are these what I'm calling my moments of magic. And so there are some days that do, even since the summer has kind of started and the air conditioning has come on and all the windows have closed up and I'm not walking quite as much, I'm still having some like really just magical days. But then I have days that just feel like the complete opposite. So it's a work in progress. And I think also part of it's understanding that no matter what lifestyle or community you're living in, like what ideology you're following, like the human experience means we're going to have bad days. And I think part of what I'm learning with slow living and mindful living is learning how to let go of and release those bad days rather than carrying them on into the next day and the next day and the next day. In my fiber update, I talked about how in the vlogs I want to be sharing the kind of good moments and the not so good moments as it relates to my fibro, and I want to be able to do the same thing with slow living. Let me know in the comments if there's anything in particular that you would like me to talk about. I wanted to kind of finally sit down and make this video to kind of give you the kind of broader context for when I talk about slow living in the vlogs, or when I show one of the books that I'm reading or something like that, because I've talked about this in bits in the vlogs, but I've never really like said this is like a thing I'm wanting to do. So if you've made it this far in the video, thank you. Please put slow down in the comments, or leave me some nature inspired emojis in the comments to let me know which one of you lovely people has made it this far in the video. If you enjoyed it, also please give me a thumbs up, that really helps, and subscribe if you're not subscribed. Thank you very much for watching this video, and I will see you all very soon in the next one. Bye!